Good morning, everyone. I would like to call this meeting to order and note that we have a quorum and appoint Ashley Fry, the Director of ACHP's Office of External Engagement, as the recorder for the meeting. Just want to welcome all of our members and the audience here and watching online to this June business meeting. I am greatly appreciative to the staff of the council, particularly the Office of Administration, for making these arrangements for us today. I think we have a little bit more space than we did in February, so I think people maybe are thankful for that, and really just providing a good host here for us at the National Building Museum. We are live casting today's meeting on Facebook and YouTube, and some are listening, I think, from our own large conference room in the ACHP staff area upstairs, and others, I assume, are joining us online from outside of DC. I will, at this point, ask Ashley to do a roll call of members and ask her to state any proxies being held. Ashley.
Sure. Thank you. All right. Vice Chairman Voyles.
Here.
Councilmember Michael Bose.
Here.
Councilmember Margaret Everson. Here. Councilmember Jamie Gardner. Here. Councilmember Rick Gonzalez.
Present.
Councilmember Marek String.
Here.
Councilmember Kyle Scher.
Here.
Councilmember John Tsuda.
Present.
Emmy Adamas, designee for Governor Jeff Landry. Here. Okay. The Honorable Robert Simison. Joseph Imamura for the Architect of the Capitol.
Here.
Katie Devlin for the Council on Environmental Quality. Michael Bourne for the Department of Agriculture. Trey Watkins for the Department of Homeland Security. Brian Horn for the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Kevin Lilly for the Department of the Interior. Lauren Smith for the Department of Transportation.
Here.
Department of Veterans Affairs. Kristen Thomasgard for the Department of War.
Here.
Christy Tunstall-Williams for the General Services Administration. Ann Rains for the National Conference of State Historic Preservation Officers. Lakota Hobai for the National Association of Tribal Historic Preservation Officers.
Here.
Carol Quillen for the National Trust for Historic Preservation.
Here.
John Fowler for the ACHP Foundation.
Here.
Stephanie Paul for the National Alliance for Preservation Commissions. Emily Dominic for the Permitting Council.
Here.
Ann Walker for the Preserve America Youth Summit. And Patrice Fry for Repurpose Capital. And we do have a proxy today. The Department of Housing and Urban Development will be a proxy for the Department of Veterans Affairs.
Thank you, Ashley. At this time, I do want to move forward and adopt the agenda for today. So at this point, the agenda should have been in your meeting book, allowing for ample review for you prior to the meeting. At this point, I will ask for a motion and a second to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second. I believe a simple voice vote will work for this. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you. Now we will need to adopt the minutes from the February meeting. That was also found in your meeting book. Before we proceed with that, any questions or any questions on the minutes from the February meeting? Seeing none, I would ask for a motion and a second to adopt the minutes.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, we're off to a great start. Good job, everyone. I will move on to the first item in the agenda, which is the Vice Chairman's report. So, Like I said earlier, I'm very appreciative that we have a very strong showing at the meeting today. And I'm just greatly appreciative for all the members. I said this last night at our reception, for all the members that have traveled in across the country to attend. And of course, our federal agency partners that hopped in an Uber or car service and came right over here. So thank you all. I know you all have very busy lives and days and jobs on the that take up your actual time. So very appreciative of the service that you're providing and serving on this council. I do want to thank those that attended the reception last night, the members, the staff, the alumni as well. We had a number of folks there. Greatly appreciative of the ACHP staff for making sure everyone was aware of that, and greatly appreciative of the foundation for hosting us. So looking forward to today was the major theme, but also getting to know each other and getting to make that connection outside of the regular ACHP role. Since many of us here are just meeting maybe in person for the second time, first, if you weren't at the first meeting in February, I am going to ask us to go around and each member introduce themselves. I know we just did that through the roll and roster, but just good to put names to faces one more time. So I will start here to my left. Go ahead, sir.
Great. All right. Thank you, Vice Chair Voyles. Good morning, everybody. Dr. Joe Imamura. I represent Mr. Tom Austin, Architect of the Capitol. I'm the special delegate for the Architect of the Capitol. I represent Mr. Austin and the agency on various boards, commissions, and councils.
Hi, good morning. Kristen Thomas-Gard. I am in the role of Acting Deputy Assistant Secretary of War for Environmental Management and Restoration. This position is delegated as a representative to ACHP by our Secretary, Pete Hegseth. Pleasure to be with you today. Thank you.
Good morning. Michael Bowes, representative of the general public. I, in my professional career, serve as the Executive Vice President and General Counsel of Citizens United, and I also have a private law practice.
Bonjour, Manawabin. My name is Lakota Hobai. I am the chair for the National Association of Tribal Historic Preservation Officers. I am also the TIPO for the Machmanashuish Band of Potawatomi Indians located in Southwest Michigan and an enrolled member at Citizen Potawatomi Nation. Miigwech.
Good morning, John Tsuda. I'm the statutorily required tribal member on the council, and I'm a member of the Kiowa Tribe of Oklahoma.
Thank you. Margaret Everson. I serve as an expert member. I previously, during the first Trump administration, had several roles in the Department of the Interior, and I am currently a consultant with Mill Run Strategies.
Good morning, Christy Tunstall-Williams. I'm the GSA Federal Preservation Officer, and I am representing our Administrator, Edward Forrest.
Good morning. I'm Stephanie Paul, Executive Director of the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions, and we serve as an observer to the Council. Thanks.
Good morning, everybody. Kyle Shearer. I am an expert member on ACHP, and in my other job, my normal job, I'm a partner at Venable in the Environment and Natural Resources Group and chair our firm's Native American law and policy practice.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Carol Quillen. I serve as president of the National Trust for Historic Preservation and represent that organization on this council.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm John Fowler. I'm the chair of the ACHP Foundation, and I served as the executive director of the ACHP in the past.
Good morning, Katie Devlin, the Senior Director for Policy at the Council on Environmental Quality.
Good morning, I'm Mike Boren. I am the Undersecretary for Natural Resources and Environment at the United States Department of Agriculture. And in that position, I work with the Environmental Regulatory and Permitting Office and the United States Forest Service.
Good morning, I'm Emily Dominich. I'm the Executive Director of the Federal Permitting Council, an independent agency that serves to foster projects through federal permitting, and I'm on the council as an observer.
Morning, everyone. My name is Brian Horn. I'm the Deputy Assistant Secretary in the Office of Grant Programs at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and I represent HUD here today.
Good morning. I'm Jamie Gardner. I'm a member of the general public on the council, and I'm also executive vice president at Novitas Communications, which is a PR firm in Denver, and I have been, if you will, a CHP adjacent for about 25 years. I held several roles at the Department of Interior and BLM about 20 years ago.
Good morning, I'm Trey Watkins. I'm the Chief Readiness Support Officer here representing DHS, Department of Homeland Security.
Good morning, y'all. My name is Emmy Adamas. I'm representing Governor Jeff Landry from Louisiana.
Good morning. It's nice to hear you all.
I know.
I'm Kevin Lilly. I'm the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary executing the designated authority as Assistant Secretary of Fish and Wildlife and Parks and representing the Department of the Interior. And I'm from Texas.
Lauren Smith, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Policy at the U.S. Department of Transportation. The Policy Office of DOT contains our main coordinating element on environment and permitting and historic preservation issues. And I was born in Washington, D.C. We're talking about background.
Go Nats.
Good morning. Marek String. I'm a representative of the general public. I practice law locally and was previously the State Department legal advisor.
Good morning. Ann Rains, President of the National Conference of State Historic Preservation Officers. And in my day job, I am the Deputy Director of the Maryland Historical Trust and Deputy SHPO for Maryland.
Good morning. My name is Rick Gonzalez. I'm the President of REG Architects in West Palm Beach, Florida. I'm also a Florida Historic Commissioner and an Emeritus Trustee of the Florida Trust for Historic Preservation. Oh, it's my second time around on the board.
And I'm Ashley Fry. I'm the Director of the Office of External Engagement at the ACHP.
Good morning. I am Kelly Finizzo. I am the General Counsel at the ACHP.
Good morning. I'm Reed Nelson. I'm the Executive Director here at the ACHP. I oversee the staff and the day-to-day operations and support you all. And this accent is Minnesota nice. Yeah. Yeah.
Great, thank you all. So we'll proceed here. I'm going to provide a brief overview of just some recent activities many of y'all have been engaged with as well. Then talk through council organization and the membership committees that have been organized. And then I'm going to actually turn it over to Reed for the next agenda item. So I'm very appreciative of all the engagement the members and some agency staff have had since the last meeting. There are a number of items that we have proceeded with and worked on. I'll just hit a few here, and I think you'll hear some other topics and conversations that have really been driven by ACHP staff in the additional agenda items. I signed an extension to the positive train control program comment that the ACHP first issued in 2014 for another 10 years per the provisions for extensions. We have also been hard at work working with the staff to move forward with the rescission of ACHP's NEPA and UDAG regulations that y'all, many of you voted on previously during different meetings. Those, I believe, should be going out for public comment here. Any end of this week? End of this week. Great. We've also worked with ACHP staff to develop a policy on compensation and travel expense reimbursements for applicable members. Thanks to those members that have particularly commented and provided staff a little bit more guidance and clarity as we get to a final product. That final guidance should be going out here pretty soon. We have also engaged further with you and Army leadership on the program comment for warfighting readiness that we adopted on April 3rd. Really thankful for the members in the lead up to the February business meeting, after the February business meeting, and during the process to get that across the finish line. And your engagement as members and questions, I think, helped me, helped ACHP staff, helped DOW and the Army, and we're happy that we got to a good place on that. I'll stop there. Any questions on those recent activities? All right, seeing none. I also, you saw in your meeting packet, and I've had conversations with a few of you on the efforts to organize membership for committees. This is a topic that Reed, I believe, covered in previous meetings and has talked to many of you about. I really appreciate those that have commented on the structure, roles, and the benefit of maintaining the ACHP's 3 standing committees following our last meeting. I think it's important that the work of these committees continue, both to inform the work before the council and to give you more avenues for engaging with your fellow members and me. This was a point I reinforced last night at the reception. But especially in between those business meetings, it provides that opportunity for engagement and further work. I have included in the meeting book the rosters proposed for each committee, as well as slight adjustments to the name. If you have history with ACHP, then you will note those adjustments and in the names and descriptions of the responsibilities for all 3. In general terms, these elements have stayed essentially the same, with some minor adjustments for clarity. In the case of the Preservation Initiatives Committee, a broadening of the scope to clarify that it includes preservation programs, along with a slightly shorter name. The roster, I believe, demonstrates my interest in having each member formally serve on just one committee, so that I can raise expectations of their participation in that one meeting. Though, as we have in the past, and I am very supportive of this, and I've clarified this to a few members just in the past few days, I'm fine with members choosing to join and participate in any of the 3 committees if they have time to do so, and I heavily encourage it. I'm also pleased to report that Rick Gonzalez has agreed to chair the Preservation Initiatives Committee, something he did in the first Trump administration, and that John Tsuda has agreed to chair the Tribal and Indigenous Peoples Committee. I look forward to working with you both in that capacity, and I'll give either one of y'all the opportunity if you have anything to say. I'm not requiring you to say anything, but just wanted to let y'all have that opportunity if you wanted. Okay. I will be chairing the Regulations and Governance Committee, which will allow me to have a close hand in those efforts. But I do want to thank the 3 senior staff who will provide the primary support to these committee. Jamie Leuschinger, who will support the Regulations and Governance Committee, Ashley Fry, who will support the Tribal and Indigenous Peoples Committee, and Blythe Semmer, who will support the Preservation Initiatives Committee. Feel free to reach out to them if you have any questions. I believe they're all sitting right around this room, so find them afterwards if you already have ideas. My expectation is that these committees will begin to meet soon, once midway between this and our next business meeting, and if possible, right before the next business meeting again, just to make sure there's alignment going into the next business meeting. Doing so will allow you and allow the committees to provide any recommendations on agenda items and develop advice to the broader membership on issues under their consideration for the next meeting. I would also note that the committee chairs may be asked from time to time to advise me on issues other issues that arise in between business meetings, so we can take any appropriate action if that is needed. So at this point, I'll shift to the next agenda item. Sorry, let me stop there. Any questions on the committee structure? And
So I will state that NATHPO appreciates and welcomes your work in clarifying the council's committee structures and making those assignments more meaningful. We understand that, obviously many people have various duties pulling them different ways, and so we can appreciate that perspective. We welcome the opportunity to continue serving as the vice chair of the Tribal and Indigenous Peoples Committee. And we really hope to continue the work that we've been doing regarding a lot of the policy statements that have come out in the past years on burial sites, human remains and funerary belongings, and the role of Indigenous knowledge in the realm of historic preservation. And we see that as an important place to advance the issues of specific concerns of Indian tribes, Native Hawaiians, and other Indigenous peoples. However, tribal issues should not be confined to that committee alone. We are concerned that NATHPO, NCSHPO, and the National Trust are not formally included on the Regulations and Governance Committee. As it's described in the meeting book, that committee advises on Section 106 regulations, improvements to the Section 106 process, policy and guidance, nationwide program alternatives, and internal agency operating procedures. That portfolio goes directly to how the National Preservation Program functions, and often we are the ones day to day always engaging in 106. That is what we are doing day in and day out. ACHP has recognized its trust relationship, and we do truly appreciate that effort in ensuring that the Section 106 regulations require federal agencies consult with Indian tribes at every significant step of the process. That responsibility should not only be reflected in the final policy, but also in the council structure of the committees. And so, therefore, NATHPO does request that the core preservation partners be formally included on the Regulations and Governance Committee. This would help ensure that tribal historic preservation officers, state historic preservation officers, and the broader preservation community are represented where regulations, governance, Section 106 policy, and program alternatives are shaped. Additionally, I think, as I mentioned, we are the daily practitioners. We are seeing with a broad focus on how Section 106 is occurring throughout the U.S. And I think relying on that experience is very key. Thank you much.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions?
Thank you, and thank you, Lakota, for bringing up that issue. Workload notwithstanding, NCSHPO would also request to be added to the member roster for the governance committee. I couldn't have said it better. This is the work that we and our members do every day, and I think we would bring an important perspective to that, and have been on it for many years in the past. So we would appreciate joining the committee.
Any other questions or comments? So I'll just say a few words. I appreciate the interest. Y'all are not the only ones that expressed interest in other committees. The view that I took and the approach that I took was, formally serving on one and more than able to serve on and participate on. Actively participate on any other as well. So I encourage your attendance and participation in the discussions on all of the other ones that you may not be a formal member on, but this is the approach that we're going to proceed with for now. As always, like you said, I don't expect all the regulation discussion and policy discussion to happen in one committee. I would expect that all three committees are having those discussions and more than willing to think of ways to engage committees together if there seems to be issues that arise where there's overlap. All right, so at this point, I'll shift it over to Reed for the Executive Director's report.
All right, thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, and good morning again. It's good to see you all. So I wanted to just go through a few things relating to appropriations and operations and things like that and do a brief report for you all this morning. First of all, regarding the status of the 2026 appropriations and funding, the year we're operating in, we are continuing to operate under the appropriated revenues and are carrying out a number of actions in the agency to complete renovations in our office space. If you recall, we had sort of reduced our footprint by about half, which required that we do some modifications on the remaining half that we're occupying. And so we're completing some work there in some of the office spaces, and also working on a number of critical IT requirements. As I remind you all, we are a tiny agency with the same IT responsibilities that very large agencies have. So it really takes quite a bit of effort and revenues for us to maintain our systems to government standards. So we're doing some good work there as well. If you recall, for FY 2026, the President had requested $5.151 million for our operating expenses, and we received $8.285 million. We were fortunate to get a little more than was requested, in part because if you recall, we had substantial staff reductions in the prior year, and staff reductions come with severance pay, and so that has allowed us to to carry out the responsibilities we have for severance pay and a number of other things. We're also hopeful that we may be able to use some of these revenues for additional investments in the cultural resource data platform that we spoke about last February, and that the Permitting Council has graciously funded for us as well. So working on a variety of things there. We don't anticipate having any carryover as usual, and I think we're in a good position to to spend and to sort of meet our obligations through the remainder of this fiscal year. Regarding the 2027 budget, you may recall that once again the President requested $5.151 million for our operations. Just a week and a half ago or so, we learned that the House has proposed $6.2 million for our operations, which would be about $1 million more than we had requested. Have not seen a number from the Senate yet. Typically, the Senate number is a little bit higher. So, fingers crossed, and we'll see where we end up in that. But I know there are discussions on the Hill going on right now about those matters. Just a few things about ACHP operations and organization. I wanted to just report that Catherine Orr was promoted to the position of Associated General Counsel, thereby doubling the staff in our Office of General Counsel, going from 1 to 2. That's a 100% increase there. So, and we appreciate Catherine serving in that role, and I know Kelly's thankful to have her assistance and support as well. So we're very pleased about that. We also said goodbye to Megan Borthwick a few months ago. She had assisted us in our partnership with the Permitting Council, but left to take another position. She was a great part of the staff, and we wish her well. We are also glad that we were able to extend the other 3 positions that the Permitting Council supports through the remainder of this fiscal year. Those positions have been really important to us, and we very much appreciate the Permitting Council's support for those. All of those positions, one way or another, help us address the important work of advancing Section 106 reviews and environmental reviews for infrastructure projects and other projects, and so we've done some great things with those positions. I won't reintroduce them, but I just wanted to acknowledge that again last night at the reception I introduced the 3 interns that we have, and so we're fortunate to have a great group of interns again as well. They're supported both by the Gen Rett Foundation and the ACHP Foundation. So things are going very well, and I'm always happy to report further on any questions you may have on the ACHP's day-to-day operations, and always looking forward to any conversations you may want to have. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Any questions for Reed?
Are any of the interns in the room with us today? Yeah. Raise your hand if you are. There they are. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions for Reed?
Travis, if I might note that we have 2 interns that are HBCU interns, and this is an initiative consistent with the President's executive order last year on promoting HBCU programs. And this is the first time that we have had HBCU interns, and we are working to provide them an enhanced experience and learning about opportunities for careers in the historic preservation program.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? All right. Seeing none, we will shift to the next agenda item, regulatory updates. So the first item in this is the Section 106 regulation review. I first just want to say I appreciate all the thoughtful comments that were provided in the February meeting when this was first discussed, following the kind of intentions to conduct the review and update, move forward with an update of the 106 regulations. Many of you followed up in writing with further observations and recommendations. I know it has also garnered a lot of discussion outside of the council in thoughtful discussions and observations and recommendations. I will, any of those that made their comments in writing to us, I will work with staff to make sure that we have those comments, any comments that we've received available to you as council members. And I also appreciate everyone that volunteered their entrance in a 106 work group to assist with this effort, especially as we move forward on the progress that may be needed in between business meetings. The member book has a summary of kind of what I've said there. And, you know, I won't linger too much longer on this agenda item, given those robust conversations and given I know that there is ongoing discussion and engagement. But my plan initially right now is to follow up after this meeting with next steps on that work group and further input solicitation, including a better structured timeline of how we are moving forward on that. Many of you are well and familiar with the regulatory structure that federal agencies go through. Of course, our structure here at the council is somewhat different from that, so we will ensure that that is continually reminded so folks remember that particular structure and how the council acts as a regulation moves through that process. I think that's an important thing to consider moving forward. But I look forward to further engagement with folks on this. My initial kind of conversations that I've had with individual members have raised a number of good issues, and I think a lot of that is reflected in the comments that we've received. I think we'll hear a little bit later on about ongoing legislative efforts in this area too, so that will be something to take into account. But that's all the update today. But at this point, I do want to just open it up if there's any comments or questions or thoughts from folks.
Mr. Vice Chairman?
Yep.
Yes, sir. I have a motion, but if you may, I'd like to give a brief statement prior to my motion. Consistent, Mr. Vice Chairman, with your intent, as you just articulated, Interior bureaus are attempting to meet the procedural requirements of Section 106 for proposal undertakings are too often delayed by a consultation process that has become far more demanding and complicated than what was contemplated in the statute or the regulations. For example, the regulations prescribe a multi-step process in which there are multiple opportunities for delay, even where the regulation provides specified time periods. There is no regulatory time frame for resolving adverse effects, and consultation to resolve those effects can be protracted and overly complicated. Consulting parties also often request mitigation that is beyond the agency's authority, unacceptable to a project proponent or the agency, or unduly burdensome, which can lead to disagreements that delay the completion of the process. The regulations are not sufficiently clear that the federal agency is responsible for making all decisions, which can force agencies into endless consultation, despite the fact that historic preservation officers do not have the authority to halt, stop, or cancel a project. Consequently, interior bureaus are forced to unnecessarily and sometimes indefinitely extend the decision-making process, resulting in delays to interior projects or permitting decisions, which I'm sure we are not the only one that experienced that. Accordingly, Mr. Vice Chairman, I move that the Council direct its staff and the Office of Legal Counsel to expedite the drafting of revisions to the ACHP existing regulations. I request that within the next 30 days, ACHP staff develop and share with Council members a timeline and plan for revising the existing regulations. Following receipt of that plan, I request that Council members be given 60 days to provide substantive feedback on the revisions and that ACHP staff begin drafting the revised regulations based on that feedback. And lastly, I request that at the next business meeting, which I believe is in September, Council members receive a substantive progress update to include a definitive date for the release of the revised draft regulations for public notice. That is my motion, sir.
I second that motion.
Thank you, Sarah. I think it was Michael. So we have a second. The motion is open for discussion at this point.
May I make a few comments?
Yes, sir.
There really isn't coordination here. I wasn't anticipating this motion. It's my first meeting. But I am the Undersecretary responsible for the United States Forest Service and for all of the environmental permitting that goes along with many of the things that we have to do. And I find that often we are compromised in our ability to serve the American people by some of the ways in which the Historic Preservation Act impacts us. And I think it occurs in ways that aren't actually beneficial for historic preservation or for the American people. I could talk a lot about that, and I don't think I should spend very much time on it, but let me give you one example. We're responsible for a whole bunch of ski areas that happen to be on national forest land. And some of these ski areas are well over 50 years old. Some of them are quite old, and they have infrastructure that has gotten to be very unsafe. And yet, when they're over 50 years old, they're historic structures. And when we're trying to replace them, we sometimes are delayed for years just by the historic piece. That's one example that involves safety. I could give you all kinds of examples of issues with the structures that we own and manage. I don't know if you know it, but the Forest Service has 30,000 employees and 40,000 buildings, the majority of which are over 50 years old. Some of these buildings are in utter disrepair. We don't have budget to maintain them in the way that we would like to, but that's not an excuse. That just means we have to work harder and find partners and find ways to maintain them appropriately. As of this date, we're not maintaining about 15,000 of those structures. They're falling apart. Almost all 15,000 of those are what we could determine to be historic structures, although I find it a little bit offensive to the idea of historic that some of the modular buildings from the 1960s and 70s that are completely not in keeping with the character of the United States Forest Service, but were built that way because we had not enough money to build good buildings at the time. Some of those are considered to be historic structures, and I think that devalues the idea of historic structures in America. But some of them are great. They're old Forest Service guard stations. They're lookouts on top of mountains. They're iconic and historic and could be beautiful. And we're not able to maintain them the way that we would like to and in a safe manner because of a lot of these things that come from what Kevin's talking about. There are a lot of ways that we at the Forest Service think we should reform some of the things that we're doing to be more in keeping with the mission of this organization, which we support. United States Department of Agriculture supports the mission of this commission and our council. And the United States Forest Service definitely supports it, not just at the top of the organization, but throughout the organization. We're an historic organization from 1905, and our people are proud of the heritage, and we're proud of our old yard stations and lookouts and structures and all of the things that we do to promote productivity of the forests and health of the forests and grasslands. And all the things that we do to promote outdoor recreation, which we think is vital to the character and health of the American people. And we can't do it well, given the way we manage the process around historic preservation today. We have a lot of specific examples and suggestions. Maybe that's for a different time. As I said, this is my first meeting, and I don't really know what the protocol here is. But I have a lot of comments if you want me to give them.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions, comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make sure that I understand the motion that the Assistant Secretary is making. As I understand it, it's an affirmation by the group that 106 regulations, regulation reform will continue, that a timeline will be developed, and that process should be well underway when we meet next in September?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Vice Chairman, I want to follow up with Mr. Lally's comments at the state level, you know, as a local practitioner. We have a tsunami that's coming on top of us. We have homes and buildings that are 50 years old, mid-century modern, ranch, traditional, minimal traditional. And as an example, you know, finishing some work this past year on a historic resources report, 250 homes in a small town in Florida. Another county now has similar conditions, but it's going to be over 2,000 buildings because of the effect of the 50-year rule. So we need to figure out a way from the state level to the national level on how are we going to expedite this tsunami. You know, this is a huge amount of product that's out there. And as the Undersecretary mentioned, some of it is you know, trailers and things that are really, you know, we need to start thinking, you know, a different way of doing this, you know, because we're just not going to be able to do it. And I'm concerned for staff, right? I'm concerned for your staff. Not only have you lost 50% of your staff, this is a huge amount of work that needs to be done. And we have to figure out a way of doing this in a different manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Any other questions, comments?
So with this consideration, I would just like to iterate that this process itself needs to reflect the input of the public and the tribes, and any plan should focus first and foremost on how consultation and outreach should occur. The tribal issues with 106 are how agencies impact cultural sites, and rushed revisions would perpetuate inconsistent agency practices to consult and consider tribal concerns. Additionally, I just want to reiterate that tribes have a statutory role, and that needs to be recognized in this process, and jurisdictional responsibility. And a reminder that there are 575 distinct federally recognized tribal nations, and ACHP must provide time and meaningful opportunities for tribes to understand the issues, to coordinate internally within their tribal governments, and provide informed input.
Thank you. I saw Carol.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. I'm speaking on behalf of the National Trust here, but also a little bit on behalf of myself. I think most of you know I'm stepping down from this role, so I have, you know, limited authority to speak on behalf of the National Trust. But I would say that, you know, generally speaking, we support the review of Section 106 and recognize that the current process can pose challenges for federal agencies and also for preservation practitioners. I would urge the Council in constructing that review not to repeat the mistake that has led to many of those delays, which is not including preservation practitioners in the conversation early. So if preservation practitioners are included in the conversation early, then all of the things that preservation makes possible become apparent through that process. Otherwise, what tends to happen is that preservationists are presented with an already fully formed project at the end of the planning and can say one of two things, yes or no. If preservationists are included in the conversation from the beginning, especially in the review of a Section 106 process, the process will be better, it will be faster, preservation goals will be served, and it will be a kind of a win-win situation. But if preservation practitioners are presented with a plan into which they had no input, then the result is going to be not good for anybody. Things that only practitioners know won't be considered. New delays will occur because people will be angry. So I would just urge you, Vice Chairman, as you put together this committee, to make sure that there are the voices of preservation practitioners who really understand how Section 106 could work involved in that review. And I believe that this would result in a better process for the agencies, for the American people, and for preservation generally of the historic resources that matter. That's my first comment. And my second comment is that in the past, we've thought about in this council, we've thought about a tiered classification for buildings that might qualify for historic consideration, and that might serve to speed up the process by allowing for the classification of some structures as simply not, where the process would be different. See what I mean? So you wouldn't have to treat an iconic historic structure in the same way that you treat another kind of building. And that might be one way of speeding up the process for federal agencies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carol. Yep, either one. I see a mic lit up.
Thank you. I want to echo Carol's comments there. As representing local historic preservation commissions across the country, we do also want to recognize, that the voice at the local level is important, and the early aspect of it, of being engaged early and as a party there, and also, the consistency at the federal level and at the state level is important. We have been doing outreach with our members, and that's, some of the different things that we're hearing is not in early engagement, and also lack of consistency at times. So we appreciate, and we're looking forward to, this review and, being a part of this process.
As an observer, I'd like to make an observation. Having been involved in the prior revisions of the Section 106 regulations, this is the first time in 25 years that we've looked at the Section 106 regulations. And I think it's critical that when we look at changes, we look at what the problems are that we're trying to solve. If you read the regulations, you see that the federal agencies are in complete control of the process. There are time limits on SHPOs, THPOs, the public, the ACHP. And at the end of those time limits, the agency is free to move forward. In the consultation process, the agency can terminate that consultation anytime it wants to and go and get comments from this body. Now, granted, most agencies don't want to do that, and that very rarely happens. But my point is that we hear anecdotal stories of this horror story or that horror story or so on, but we haven't looked at the regulations in a systematic way. We need to hear from the participants in the process, applicants, businesses, preservationists, communities, what have you. And I think it's very important that the process that this council undertakes is one that is transparent, inclusive, and very carefully documented for making any regulatory changes, because these changes will be around, from my experience, for a long time. So I would just urge the membership to think about that in terms of setting any strict timeframes for moving forward. I think also you need to consider that, as you know, the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee held a hearing on the Section 106 process back in the fall. They're actively considering possible amendments to the NHPA as part of permitting reform. And it would seem to me to be unwise to reach conclusions on our changes to the regulations until the legislative process clarifies, because what happens if the law changes and we've adopted, you've adopted, that's an old habit I have a lot of trouble breaking. But if the ACHP were to adopt regulatory changes and then have the underlying law changed, then we're back to the drawing board. So I just share that with the members for your consideration.
Thanks, John. Appreciate your optimistic outlook of Congress. I can say that. I was a former congressional staffer. So, Reed, I'll turn it over to you now.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a couple observations about the way that the motion was structured and maybe suggest some sort of mechanical changes. First of all, I note that the motion suggests that the general counsel make those recommendations. I would urge you to consider changing that to the executive director, who has the ultimate and final responsibility for staff recommendations to the council. But more importantly and beyond that, I would just note that the ACHP staff are always happy, and it's sort of what we do to make recommendations to you all. But I don't think the staff recommendations should be the final word on that timeline, and that the members themselves, upon receiving those recommendations, should consider acting on adopting them or agreeing to and establishing those timelines. So I just want to be clear that we can certainly provide that advice, but it's more meaningful and impactful when you then make the final decision as the members. I would also just say one other thing, just in terms of the mechanics, perhaps before a vote, that we would appreciate you rereading the motion carefully when we get to that point, just so that we have it right. Thank you, Mr. Vice
Yeah,
Chairman.
I want to make this clear that the intent of this is not to have your staff make decisions. The intent is for you guys to provide us a reasonable timeline just based upon operational realities, but that we, the council, has 60 days from the time you put together that prospective timeline for us to provide input, right? There is no final decision that is in my motion. This is a contemplative process whereby we all take, but the point is to have a timeline to get this started, so that we all realize that over the next 90 days, effectively, before the next meeting, everyone in this room will be involved, every department will be involved in providing the input that all of you have shared. So this is not intended to be a conclusion. This is intended to be procedural and a process that has specific timelines associated with it, so we can meet those goals, and that ultimately in September we have something important to talk about. So I will reread it. Mr. Vice Chairman? Okay. All right. I move that the council direct its staff and the Office of Legal Counsel to expedite the drafting of revisions to the ACHP's existing regulations. I request that within the next 30 days, ACHP staff develop and share with council members a timeline and plan for revising the existing regulations. Following receipt of that plan and timeline, I request the council members be given 60 days to provide substantive feedback on the revisions that the ACHP staff began drafting, and revise regulations based on that feedback. Lastly, I request that the next business meeting, council members receives a substantive progress update to include a definitive date for the release of the revised regulations for public notice. And then, of course, that begins the public notice portion that you have all, so.
Excuse me, can I ask one point of clarification in that last piece? When you say public notice, are you referring to the Federal Register public notice? From an operational standpoint, the council would have to vote prior to that notice of proposed rulemaking being published in the Federal Register. So that's not something that we could do without having the membership vote on that.
Understood. Joy, do you have any comments on that? If I may, Mr. Chairman, Joy Beasley is the keeper of the National Register of Historic Places, so I think you all know Joy. She might have a thought on that.
Would you like to sit? Okay.
Good morning. Thank you, Assistant Secretary Lilly, for having me come up. I think what the Department of the Interior is trying to press for here is clarity on the timeline for how the process is going to move. As Assistant Secretary Lilly articulated very well in his statement, the Department of the Interior strongly supports this action and is very interested in seeing it move forward expeditiously. I don't want to speak on your behalf, sir, but I think that modifications or adjustments to the motion are appropriate with regard to ACHP's operating procedures and your normal processes. But I think what the Department of the Interior is really trying to express here is a desire to see this move along, and also an interest that the members be given the opportunity, all of the members be given the opportunity to provide substantive feedback.
Thank you, Joy. I think that's incredibly useful. I leave it to the membership if you want to propose an amendment to the motion that's on the table, that then we would need a second and a vote on if you believe clarifications are needed, or to move forward with the motion in the second as presented.
Can you just reread that last portion of it for it?
Sure.
Because I think that's where.
Yeah, I think
we just want to make sure
may be the
procedurally
confusion.
that's right.
I think that lastly, I request that the next business meeting, council members receive a substantive progress update to include a definitive date for the release of revised draft regulations for public notice. That's only, again, that is not saying we are giving public notice at the next meeting. That's only to say that we are going to have a substantive date whereby whichever procedure you all use.
So I appreciate that. I think the concern I have is that we cannot vote on a date to publicly release it unless we are actually voting on the rule itself. So I think just a tweak to that final language could clarify it. I just don't want there to be any misunderstanding if this were to pass and the public were to see us saying, oh, you're going to see a revised rule November 15th, and we don't have the authority to say that without the council member voting on the rule itself.
Right, and I think, so I think the operative word here is draft, right? This is not a final rule, right?
No, draft rule, the notice of proposed rulemaking is by definition a draft.
Okay, so the first, all right, so are we suggesting that we modify the last sentence?
Yes, the intent of your word release, is that release to the committee for further action? Council for further action?
What might be helpful, maybe, because obviously the Department of the Interior isn't going to be intimately familiar with the operating procedures for ACHP. Could you offer a language to revise that, understanding what the intent here is?
Trying to do this just off the cuff, so bear with me. I think perhaps modifying the language to include the recommendation, I believe you said, for a substantive feedback, substantive report to the council at the next meeting on the timeline, and perhaps proposed dates or proposed, I think what the vice chair was suggesting is a proposed date to share with the public could include the council membership, the committees, and we could do our own some sort of public outreach prior to a notice of proposed rulemaking, but I don't want to commit us to that specific type of public release until you all have had a chance to talk further about that. So I think perhaps if you simply delete that last sentence about the date for public release on the draft regulation, because theoretically, the timeline that you all would review from the staff recommendations would include some proposed goal dates for which the rule would come for a vote. And then depending on the outcome of that vote, it would then be released to the public or not, if you all wanted more consideration.
Kelly, I have a quick question just for a point of clarification. Have we already published a notice of intent to revise in the Federal Register?
Not a notice of intent. What we have gone out, and I'm actually not even sure that it's gone public yet, is that we have joined the regulatory agenda. And we have identified the Section 106 regulations as potentially going to be revised at some point in the near future. That is not a commitment to any specific rule. It's simply to alert the public that the next thing you may see from us would be a draft of, or a, excuse me, a notice of proposed rulemaking.
Are we required to publish a notice of intent, I guess is the next question.
No.
Okay.
Okay, so just to reiterate this, so a timeline of 30 days to create a timeline, right? I think we're good there. 60 days for everyone here to provide their feedback. By the next meeting, to receive a substantive progress update, right? Good there. And I guess the question is, the definitive date for the release of a revised draft without actually having a revised draft. Can we give a goal to say by X date we will have a revised draft? Is that within our?
I guess my question there is the intent of what interior means, where that would be in the progress. So is that the intent to share for further action by the council, or is that your intent, which is the start of the regulatory process, as was talked about earlier, as the council would have to consider it and vote on it for it to start the regulatory process?
I think that the intent is to say, make this up.
Yep.
Microphone. Sorry. If we said something, for example, by December 15th, we will have a draft available. Can we do that?
I think we could just be, my read on it now, everyone hearing and I think understanding the intent, I think we could just be silent on it with the expectation that in the timeline plan, it will delineate step by step through the potential regulatory process, and we can work with staff to make that as accurate as possible. But there are steps that we don't control in that, like OMB review and different steps like that.
You lost your mic.
There are steps in that process that we don't fully control. So the steps to get it, any potential regulation out for public comment is anyone involved in the regulatory process.
You can absolutely rephrase it, and then what we'll do is get a second on that rephrasing. Vote to, anyway, let's one step at a time.
May I make a comment before you do, Mr. Vice Chairman, before you do that, Kevin? I think what Assistant Secretary Lilly is trying to get at is we, the people that in the federal government have to deal with these regulations, would like to know on behalf of the American people how quickly we can get to revising Section 106 in a way that's beneficial to the American people and beneficial to the mission of this body.
Yeah. And I think you will get that in that 30-day timeline.
This is for Kevin's benefit while he's revising.
Okay.
We used to sit next to each other every morning over at Interior, and I think he's great at off the cuff, but I want to make sure we clarify this. Sitting here at this meeting and listening to some very valid comments, I was struck by the fact that every day I learned something new about why we don't make positive changes in any reasonable amount of time. And that is that there are all these obstacles, like Congress is thinking about something, about doing something about this because they know it's a problem for the American people, but they take forever and maybe they don't get anything done. In fact, very likely they don't. So if we decide that we're going to wait for them, we're never going to do anything while we're part of this group on this particular topic. We'll do a lot of other things, but we won't solve this problem that Kevin and I and other people in the room understand from a different point of view. We understand it from the point of view of the American people and their businesses and their livelihoods and their desire to interact with historic places and with the land. And we understand that life is tenuous for people, and we don't know if we'll be here tomorrow or next year or in 60 or 90 days to enjoy the fruits of what this group of people are trying to do. And so you're trying to make it go more quickly. But there's this obstacle. There are many obstacles, but there's this obstacle that this language indicates doing things that we don't have control over. What I'm interested in, Kevin, is the 30 days and the 60 days and what the result after that is. What I'm really interested in is holding this commission to a date to have this completed and voted on, and then in a position to put out for whatever notice we need to do. But changing the definitive date for the release of the revised draft regulations, I don't think that phrase needs to be in there, but I'd love to know of a date after the 60 days when the staff will be finished with their work and we can have a motion and make a vote and take a vote. I'd love that. But I understand about the definitive date for the release of the revised draft regulations. We probably can't do that in this motion.
I understand everyone's point. Again, this is my first meeting, so I'm sort of throwing it out there, y'all. You know, so the question that I have is, could we say break, or could I break and then think about this and then come back, but still accomplish this in this meeting? Or if I leave my station here, I lose my vote?
No, we can do that. We can table this for this moment, and I'm sure ACHP staff may be willing to take a red pen and just get to a good.
So we just need a motion to table and a second, and then we can do a quick voice vote if you all agree.
Motion to table.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor of tabling the motion, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed?
Yeah.
The motion carries.
Still a few outstanding comments, at least that wanted to be made. I know Ann had her hand up, and I had one comment I wanted to make.
So there was a motion and there was a second. Are there any questions on the motion and second at hand to table the original motion?
Well, we just tabled this particular motion. Do you want to take a break? And then I think if the intent is that you're going to reintroduce a new motion, a modified motion, if we get a second, and then I think there's more, we have to have discussion.
Yep.
Does that archaic enough?
Fair enough.
Okay,
Great.
thank you.
All right. We will move along, and I will encourage, I see Interior getting up, so that's good. So they will work on that while we hear some further updates. I do want to turn next to program alternative updates. I'm going to turn it over to Jamie Leushinger here in just a second to help me update you on ACHP's efforts to implement several program alternatives that it adopted in 2024. Each has provisions that require staff to report annually to the members on their implementation, and this is the first opportunity for them to do so following their adoption. Before I turn it over to Jamie, I do want to particularly draw members' attention to the program and comment on certain housing, building, and transportation undertakings because I feel like it is very tied to a discussion update later on in this agenda on housing. It's my view, and I think staff's view as well, that we see this as an opportunity area as we move forward as a council. So I'll turn it over to Jamie.
Thank you, Vice Chair Voyles. pleased to provide an update to the members on 2 ACHP program alternatives. I'll start with that particular program comment, which for those who were not here at the time, it was adopted by the membership on December 20th, 2024. The program comment includes 2 appendices. Appendix A lists activities that do not require further review by federal agencies when an undertaking meets its terms. The second, Appendix B, lists activities that require the use of qualified professionals in the relevant discipline and the satisfaction of certain conditions to expeditiously conclude a Section 106 review. Should agencies choose to utilize the program comment, they're required to notify the ACHP. The meeting book paper that you all received notes that 6 agencies have chosen to utilize the program comment. A 7th actually just came in after that meeting book was published. So it would be Rural Utility Service, Rural Business Cooperative Service, the Forest Service, the Bureau of Reclamation, the Department of War on behalf of its components, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and most recently the Environmental Protection Agency have all chosen to use the program comment. The program comment requires agencies to submit annual reports regarding their usage. Based on the timing of when agencies notified us to use the program comment, that resulted in 4 annual reports for this past year. And staff are required, per the program comment's terms, to provide you all with that update on the implementation of the program comment. Please note that the program comment also requires staff to convene an annual meeting to include federal agencies, tribes, state historic preservation officers, Native Hawaiian organizations, and others as appropriate to assess its implementation. While this has not yet occurred, I anticipate scheduling that this summer and look forward to getting feedback to the broader group of consulting parties. Turning back to the program comments usage, Appendix A was used for 984 undertakings, while Appendix B was only used 22 times. So members may wish to consider whether the program comment would benefit from modifications. For instance, given the very limited usage of Appendix B, it may be that this appendix could be removed in its entirety. At a minimum, though, I do recommend that members consider simplifying the program comment or that particular appendix, given its sort of complicated conditions and as well as its reporting requirements. And also considering how to include mitigation if that appendix were to be retained, in that the undertakings therein do sometimes result in adverse effects to historic properties. Additionally, should the program comment scope be limited solely to Appendix A, it could be converted to an exemption, as these activities have demonstrated that they are undertakings whose effects are minimal or not adverse. Conversion to an exemption could also eliminate the annual reporting and meeting requirements, as other ACHP issued exemptions do not include those stipulations. Removal of those requirements also appears consistent with the administration's interest in reducing unnecessary and burdensome reporting requirements. So, should the members wish to make these kinds of modifications, it is important to note also that the benefits of the program comment would remain, particularly for housing, which is an interest of this administration. I'll pause there and happy to answer questions or hear other feedback.
Thank you, Jamie. My question is about the process for amending the program comment. Could you sort of outline that and how this might proceed from here if this is something the council wants to explore?
Absolutely. The amendment provision within the program comment does require the members to essentially vote on an amendment to revise its terms. So how that would be done, typically would be staff would be happy to draft an amendment for the membership's consideration. Reed might have another idea there as well.
Sure. I would just add, I think the first step would be particularly considering that the vice chairman has just reestablished the committee structure to perhaps include the discussion about the potential value of amendments in the next Regulations and Governance Committee meeting, and really give the members the sort of the more detailed opportunity they might appreciate to talk about how it's operating and about how we might improve that operations. I would also just urge, in terms of the timing, that it would probably benefit us to have that annual meeting that Jamie referenced first, so that we could hear also from the federal agencies that are using it and from states and tribes and others that are sort of aware and engaged in it on some level, just how it's operating, and then perhaps have that discussion with the committee, and then the committee could make its recommendations to the broader membership. So don't mean that to be convoluted. I just am suggesting we take advantage of those regulation and governance committee meetings to the extent that we can.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, so there's not a time frame as there was in the original program comment for consultation with SHPOs and TIPOs in an amendment. Is that right? I'm just wondering how we get the feedback that we need to be able to vote on the matter and provide input.
So that would very much depend on the nature of potential amendments. If they were small administrative amendments, I think we could make the case that such broader consultation was not necessary. But if we're looking at major substantial adjustments and changes to it, there may be some, obligation by the ACHP to consult on that. But those are the sort of things that I would suggest be teased out after we get the recommendations of the committee members and the general membership about whether we should consider those. Anything we would do then after that point would hopefully include a plan for whether consultation was necessary, et cetera.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Jamie?
Happy to go ahead and turn over then to the other particular program alternative that was included in this update. In September 2024, the membership approved the exemption for Indigenous knowledge-informed activities by Native Hawaiian organizations. This exemption allows agencies a path to exempt activities that meet its terms when informed by Indigenous knowledge from Native Hawaiian organizations. Given the smaller scope of the exemption compared to the previous program comment, it is not surprising to see that its usage was limited to 10 undertakings based on the reports we received. The agencies who submitted those annual reports identified no implementation issues with the exemption. This particular program alternative also does require an annual meeting. We anticipate doing that this summer as well. While no implementation issues were identified, given the limited number of undertakings meeting its terms, members may wish to consider whether these annual reports should continue to be required. Removal of that particular provision, again, would be consistent with other ACHP-approved exemptions, as well as the administration's interest in reducing unnecessary reporting. So, happy to answer any further questions on that as well.
So I would just like to state NASPO does support removing the annual reporting and annual meeting requirements for the exemption, particularly if those requirements are viewed as burdensome given the limited number of undertakings using the exemption. At the same time, we do encourage the ACHP to retain some form of rolling submission or periodic feedback process. That information would be useful for informing future preservation policy, guidance, training, and potential program alternatives. This exemption is important because it recognizes the perpetuation of Indigenous cultural practices that should not unnecessarily be subjected to federal regulatory review when those activities are Native Hawaiian-led, informed by Indigenous knowledge, and connected to traditional cultural practices. NASPO looks forward to working together with the ACHP and the Native Hawaiian community to ensure this exemption continues to support Indigenous knowledge, cultural practice, and future policy development.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments?
I just wanted to make a couple of comments about program comments about program comments. In general, I think that this discussion is a healthy one to look at a program comment that was previously passed and to see how it is working and what impact it's having and how it might be narrowed or broadened and so forth. I think everyone here probably remembers that we've commented about the Army program comment, the Army warfighting program comment. Discussion should continue about that as well as about any program comment. It is possible to amend that. I'd just like to remind everyone here that that discussion doesn't need to be considered closed. There were concerns expressed by staff about that program comment at the time that the council approved it at the last meeting, but which the council didn't take up. So I think we should at some point look at that, and those items are still on the table for consideration. There was a very short time frame in that case for us to really grapple with the legal issues that program comment brought up. The council could have pushed back more strongly about some of the provisions. After all, this is the council's program comment. Every program comment is the council's and not the federal agency's. We still maintain, NICSPO still maintains that that program comment sets a bad precedent for other program comments as far as its overreach and opens up the council for legal action, as we pointed out repeatedly, by alleviating statutory responsibilities from federal agencies and taking them away from other consulting parties. So just to sort of, not get into that conversation today, but I think we should consider that that could still be opened up. And in addition to that, we would press for, as part of changes to the 106 regulations, press for changes to how program comments are defined in the regulations versus other tools that we have to streamline Section 106, or consider possibly eliminating them altogether as being unclear. So those are my comments, and I do hope that the council will consider looking at those more closely in the future. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? So at this point, our agenda has a short break, so I will adhere to the agenda and we will take a short break. So I'll kick off our next agenda item, which is the legislative agenda. So we're going to go through a summary of ACHP's legislative activity. As you know, one of the key responsibilities of the ACHP is to advise Congress and the administration on preservation matters. Most often, this responsibility is carried out in the form of comment letters to Congress on various legislative issues under the guidance of a legislative agenda that this body approves. A month or so prior to my appointment as vice chair last year, the ACHP met to discuss a number of issues, and at that time, a draft legislative agenda for the current Congress was provided by staff. Since the agency lacked a chair or vice chair at the time and could not conduct official business, it was not adopted at the time. After some discussion with staff, and given we've had a fairly packed February agenda, the review of this draft legislative agenda was better suited for today. But I do want to say this is just in my view, this should just be a review and discussion. Since there is only a limited amount of time left in this Congress, and this was a draft form last year, not with many of you that are sitting here today, my view is this draft is better suited just to use as a draft discussion launch point for today. And so that's kind of how I wanted to frame as we go into this portion of the agenda. I will ask Blythe Simmer, our Policy and Legislative Affairs Officer, to tell us a little bit more about what was contained in the legislative agenda and summarize the one in your meeting book. So I'll turn it over to her.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, and good morning, everybody. So as the Vice Chairman noted, the legislative comment responsibility is part of that, mission of the ACHP to advise the President and Congress on historic preservation. And so this is a key
Blythe,
part.
move your microphone just closer to you.
How about that? Clearer? Great. So we wanted to sort of bring the council up to speed on how the body has carried out that duty in the past, and also discuss how legislative priorities help set the sort of staff's focus for how we carry out our support of the ACHP's work in that area. And that legislative agenda is what kind of helps offer that direction. This is also a timely topic as the committee structure is sort of reinvigorated, and as the members of the Preservation Initiatives Committee begin their work, this is traditionally where those issues are discussed and formed for recommendations to the full council for possible action. At this point, though, we do find ourselves with only about 7 months or a little less remaining in the current Congress. So typically these legislative agendas are developed at the start of a new congressional term. In this case, as the Vice Chair noted, we discussed some kind of draft legislative priorities based, again, sort of on how those had been handled in the past at that March meeting last year. And generally, the staff has continued to be guided by those in the work that we've done in legislative tracking to try to keep an eye on things that are traditionally of interest to the members of the council and topics that are frequently presented here. So we've sort of been, once you didn't know, we've been working kind of informally under that existing guidance, even without kind of the formal agenda. So in the meeting book paper, the red lines there were offered as just sort of suggestions for updating wording. Those are, we welcome any sort of discussion and feedback on those suggestions from staff based on things that we have been seeing in recent months to try to align the way the ACHP articulates those priorities with sort of topics of interest that are generally developing in the legislative sphere now. So those are there for your discussion, but as the Vice Chairman noted, we can kind of take any member feedback about those at this point, but there is, that is entirely up to the membership as far as whether that's formally adopted or not. And that also, I think, is useful preparatory work as we look ahead to continuing this process in the new year with a new Congress, that we have some of that member advice in hand as we look ahead to the agenda for the 120th. This is also, again, a topic that the Preservation Initiatives Committee can continue to discuss. The paper sort of included just a general summary of how the ACHP has commented to Congress or the administration in the past. There is no obligation that has to happen, but as you see from some of the figures that we included, that has been a regular part of the council's business over, I believe all, but certainly the last several of its terms, of the congressional terms, is that the council is offering advice. And as we noted, there tend to be some general themes. There's always, preservation funding and programs are always of interest, how preservation planning is sort of incorporated in light of other federal planning, environmental responsibilities, tax credits have frequently come up as a topic of comments, and other things. So the paper laid out some of those summaries and a little bit about how our procedure has typically worked for taking recommendations up via the committee structure to the council for action. So I will turn it back to you for any discussion.
Thank you. Any questions, comments on the materials as presented, or I'll let Reed.
Yeah, just to give you another minute to form your thoughts or comments, I just want to stress a few things. One is we have been successfully operating under the draft plan for the last year and a half or so. And if you think any adjustments to that plan are warranted, please, we'd love to hear them now. I also just want to acknowledge one thing, particularly for the new members, that the ACHP is given a rather unique authority and responsibility in the NHPA, in that we can and should advise the administration and Congress directly. So that's a little bit different than most agencies. Most agencies that are advising Congress go through sort of the normal approval process up the chain, and including OMB and others. But this body has not only the opportunity, but the responsibility, particularly to advise Congress directly. And so we've used that, I think, very effectively over the years, to make impactful recommendations and statements on preservation matters. So just keep that in mind as you consider any comments you might have. Thank you.
Open up the floor to any, Mike.
I just have a quick question, I guess, and comment. I didn't have any problem with the edits that I saw to the draft plan. I guess as a question or point of clarification for the benefit of the council, are there any major pieces of legislation pending right now that we should be aware of just in the course of things that are happening, like what was discussed earlier this morning, but are there any, is there anything else that we should have on our radar from a legislative perspective?
Sure, certainly. I mean, I think we continue we are tracking things that may have relationships to preservation programs, the National Historic Preservation Act. We did not, in preparation for today's meeting, bring or seek to bring a certain particular bill to the attention of the council, but I think that that would be in sort of one of the first items that the Preservation Initiatives Committee would consider when it begins meeting, is then staff would be preparing, sort of a summary or description of any kind of current bills that they may wish to discuss.
I would just note sort of a process observation here as well, and I think Blythe may have touched on this, but having worked so effectively with Mr. Gonzalez in the past, I can assure you that the Preservation Initiative Committee has always been taking the responsibility and sort of the obligation to do exactly what you're suggesting, Jamie. To sit down and sort of look at individual bills as they present themselves and as they sort of ripen for comment, if you will. There are, some strategic times to comment and others where it may be premature. And so I would certainly be happy to work with Mr. Gonzalez and the Vice Chairman to establish a committee agenda for our mid-cycle meeting that would start to tee up any bills and things like that that we think may be ripe for comment.
Any other questions?
Yes, so for NAFPO, we just had a few comments. We do support the ACHP adopting legislative priorities that strengthen the National Preservation Program and guide the Council's advice to Congress and the administration. We do want to note that that means improving federal review without reducing tribal consultation, weakening protections, or diminishing the role of tribes, TIPOs, SHPOs, and consulting parties. Also, we wanted to reiterate that NAFPO strongly supports reauthorizing and making permanent the Historic Preservation Fund. In particular, TIPO funding needs to be defined and predictable. We were made aware that currently any unobligated or unused TIPO funding is recaptured, and so one of the items that we would like to highlight is that instead of being recaptured, that it's redistributed among eligible TIPOs. That way that can also assist in creating more predictability and funding for TIPO work. Thank you much.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Any other questions, comments? The last thing I'll say is development of kind of the next, and this is partly getting to why we weren't moving for any action to finalize a legislative agenda, is really looking to next Congress, what that formulation of a new agenda would look like is something that I would anticipate would maybe be a discussion point at the September meeting, going into the winter meeting as well. And working through the committees. Anything else, Reed?
Yeah, and just to make one final observation, the legislative agenda, frankly, is very helpful for staff in that it sort of directs staff, to look at sort of key areas or, programs that may be appropriate for our comment or engagement. But I want to be clear as well that any member is welcome at any time to contact me or Blythe or Mr. Gonzalez or anybody with their observations about individual bills and their advice that we consider, developing a staff analysis and perhaps tee up the possible comments for the members to adopt. So a legislative agenda sort of helps guide us, but it doesn't necessarily restrict us, and we're always happy to hear your comments.
Any other questions, comments? Blythe?
And also just to follow Reed's comment, I wanted to clarify and just make sure everybody saw this was noted in the paper, but also in the operating procedures, that the legislative comment process can proceed at any point. It can be responsive if something starts to happen for which the council members believe that we need to take action, even though we work within the committee structure to the extent possible in those scheduled meetings. There are protocols in place for responsiveness when it's needed as well.
Thanks, Blythe. All right, no other questions. We will proceed on to the next item in the agenda, which is the ACHP's efforts to comply with Executive Order 14394, but framing that in the discussion of housing and historic preservation guidance. So on March 13th, the President issued Executive Order 14394, titled Removing Regulatory Barriers for Affordable Home Construction. Section 3B of that executive order directs the ACHP chairman, in this case me as acting, to issue guidance on maximally exempting or reducing burdens on housing construction and infrastructure that facilitates housing construction under 106. As you know, the council has spent a great amount of time on housing issues over the years. As our discussion on the program comment earlier in this meeting demonstrates, I think we're in a good position to get guidance that is responsive to the EO out soon. Because this EO requires it, I just want to make sure that in this process we are getting info from you today as members of the council as we are in the process of developing it. So I'd like to turn it back over to Blythe, who is taking the staff lead on drafting this for us. She will talk a little bit about the requirement and our thinking on the approach to any guidance, and I'll turn it over to her now.
Thank you again, Mr. Vice Chairman. So yes, on the topic of housing, it's fortunately not a new one for the ACHP to be working with in the Section 106 context. And we hope that history of experience in kind of working with these challenges and themes positions us well to be responsive to the executive order and the development of new guidance, which could take a variety of different forms. But the themes that were identified in the paper in your meeting book and proposed by staff were sort of a series of different approaches that draw on some of those areas of past experience and involvement. Certainly even members who are around the table today are familiar with the discussions related to housing that came forward in the development of the program comment on certain housing, building, and transportation undertakings, as well as the ACHP's policy statement on housing and historic preservation, both of which contain elements that could be sort of built on or expanded in our response to the executive order. So some of the strategies there is certainly work that could be done around how the use of that recent program comment, which mentions housing, is used to make it hopefully even more responsive to challenges or to finding opportunities for efficiencies within the process. There are a number of elements within the housing policy statement and its principles which could be expanded or perhaps provided, the ACHP could provide a little bit of different additional, best practices, elucidation of how that, policy principle could be applied, those kinds of things to try to take principles there and make them more kind of practically applicable to challenges within the Section 106 process. There are, certain elements that are referenced directly there, such as, housing rehabilitation and how it's handled in 106, or how archaeology is considered in those kinds of undertakings. Another area where we felt we could have some sort of immediate impact, frankly, was in clarifying what is subject to a Section 106 review as it relates to some sort of rehab and renovation projects, because we have heard comments in some of these previous efforts that seem to indicate there may be a little confusion. And folks may think that the 106 responsibility is a bit more extensive than the regulations require. And so we want to clarify kind of how, how this is applied within that context with examples so folks can understand when the review is needed and not. Finally, we also suggested highlighting opportunities to create housing using existing infrastructure, which is also a long-standing theme, I think, for historic preservation discussions and policy, but is that existing buildings may be reused for housing, and there are lots of opportunities where historic structures, historic building stock can contribute to that because of its sort of unique placement in our environment and how it can be usefully positioned to be reused as housing and whether rehabilitated or converted. So that is another area where we think we could highlight examples that might make that process and approach more approachable, frankly, in relationship to Section 106 review and contribute in that sense. So those were some of our ideas, and we would welcome council feedback about, which one of these seem most, or which of them seem most useful, any particular audiences that you feel it is important to address in this effort as well.
Thanks, Blythe. I'll open the floor up to any discussions on what she was able to cover there, and then anything else that you may have read in the materials provided, particularly those development themes that we're trying to structure any guidance around, or any potential future action.
Mr. Vice Chair?
Yes.
I'd just like to commend the staff and commend ACHP for coming up with these ideas. One of the things we learn in housing, we're going to increase the supply. We need to decrease the cost of construction. We need to increase the available land that's suitable for housing. And then we need to accelerate the delivery of those units. And we don't have enough time here today to go through everything that's good in this. But I would call out a couple of things. One, that executive order gave ACHP a job to do, which is what we're talking about today. It also gave HUD a job, and that job was to come up with a set of best practices for local and state governments, and we published that. And one of the things that I'll just highlight, adaptive reuse. We understand it conceptually, but from a housing standpoint, one of the things we run into with respect to costs is how do you fill that capital stack? The only way you can make housing affordable for people to live in at lower rates is to make it affordable for the developers to build housing that is affordable. And we run into issues of trying to meet workforce area median incomes in addition to affordable area median incomes. And what we found is that the historic tax credits form a really great part of potential projects to fill in that capital stack gap to enable these projects to be affordable for workforce. Add that to low-income housing tax credits, and now you've developed something for even affordable housing. So adaptive reuse hits at least two of the things we just talked about, which is decreasing costs, but also increasing the supply of land available for housing. And so just want to commend staff on that.
Thank you, Brian. Any other questions, comments?
Yes, Mr. Vice Chairman, on the issues of the strategy as a practitioner, having the best practices, I think, will be extremely important to show people, as we've always brought up in the past, vinyl siding, vinyl finishes versus more authentic finishes. We've made a lot of progress with that in the industries, We've allowed other cementitious products to be used. We have a huge stock of abandoned historic buildings that could be rather easily, I think, converted into affordable housing. You just have to go to, cities like Baltimore and Detroit to see thousands of units, and they're located in locations where you have transportation, they're close to shopping and other locations versus taking out more green pastures, to do more expensive housing development. Developers are going to find a way to do what is easiest path, And as the gentleman just mentioned, the historic tax credits and finding other tax credits, to allow for those funds to be used in the infrastructure, I think is extremely important. I think we have to take a lead on rehabbing historic structures to putting them to use. We talked about this, Reed, 8 years ago, right? And it's very, very important that with the education of young people in the trades to come and work on these buildings. I mean, this could be a great win-win with the ACHP being a leader to show, the country what a great opportunity. It's just sitting there, right? The greenest building is the building that hasn't been taken to the dump yet, right? So let's do something about that. Let's hopefully get in front of it and really give some good input. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Any other questions, comments? All right. Seeing none, we will proceed to the next agenda item. Thank you, Blythe. The Preserve America Executive Order Section 3 guidance. For more than 20 years, ACHP has been carrying out a set of responsibilities under the Preserve America Executive Order, which is 13287. Chief among those responsibilities is developing a report every 3 years on the progress federal agencies are making in identifying, using, and protecting historic properties under their ownership or control. We carry out this responsibility by first gathering reports from those agencies themselves on how they're doing, and then we use their progress reports to develop our own report to the President on how things are going overall. The next report to the President from this council is due February 16th of 2027, and there is much to do for us to prepare to get to that point. I'd like to turn it back over to Jamie now to ask her to catch us up on where things stand on this report as we develop it, and sorry, I lost my place in my notes, including the guidance we are developing for agencies to submit their own progress reports to us to hopefully help expedite and lessen that burden on our federal agency partners. So I'll turn it over to Jamie at this point.
Thank you, sir. So the ACHP has traditionally provided advisory guidance to federal agencies on preparing their progress reports in advance of the triennial deadlines for submitting them. We're currently reviewing the 2024 advisory guidelines to consider how to bring focus to administration initiatives that affect historic properties, as well as where historic properties can contribute to them. Federal agencies aren't required to structure their Section 3 reports in response to the questions that will be in the guidelines, but doing so does help staff in preparing the ACHP's report that addresses priorities that that have been identified by members. Agencies can use those advisory guidelines in conjunction with their own established agency reporting formats. We anticipate providing advisory guidelines to members shortly after the business meeting, but certainly welcome any feedback today on key federal property stewardship themes or questions that you think should be examined in the upcoming report. To give you some idea of what past themes have looked like, we've addressed topics such as infrastructure, job creation, and leveraging historic property outleasing. So happy to answer any questions here today.
I have a suggested topic. And I think it is the impact of the loss of qualified preservation staff at agency, following the reductions that happened early in this administration, and just how we can.
Can you speak a little more directly into your microphone?
Sorry,
we're having a hard time hearing you.
Jamie, and not to the rest of you. I apologize. The request was to include some analysis of the impact of loss of qualified staff at federal agencies to implement 106 and how that is impacting the process, as well as remediation, and it kind of ties to the earlier conversation about updating 106. Is there streamlining that can be done if we have qualified staff to help lessen the reporting burden and some of those things to happen? So that's, I think, a big big concern for GSA, and I'm sure other federal agencies are struggling.
Thank you for that. One thing I would point out too that I know I'm looking at in light of changes to staffing ourselves at the ACHP. I know I'm looking with Reed very closely at the language in the executive order to make sure that we are hewing very closely to what the intent of that was and what is being requested, so that when we are asking agencies to provide these reports, we are staying within the language of the executive order. But I think that probably some of these might be able to be teased out in those advisory guidelines. So thank you for that feedback.
Thank you. So for this reporting cycle, NAFPO would also recommend that the ACHP consider including a question on how co-stewardship, co-management, and other partnership-based stewardship models are helping federal agencies improve the identification, protection, use, and management of historic properties. That question could help identify practical examples where federal agencies are working more effectively with tribal nations, Native Hawaiian communities, states, local governments, and other partners in ways to support both preservation and agency mission needs.
Thank you.
Since the administration's taking a fairly aggressive approach to disposal of federal properties, that it seems like it would be useful to have that as a topic.
Thank you, sir.
I might just make an observation and perhaps reiterate some points that Jamie covered and that are in your meeting book paper, but every 3 years I reiterate these points, so I'll do it again. I just want to be, just certainly acknowledge that this report does have a specific, it needs to have, per the executive order, sort of a specific focus on how agencies that own or manage historic properties are identifying, using, and protecting them. So it does have sort of a certain lane, if you will. But I would also just acknowledge that this council, I think, has appropriately and sometimes creatively found ways to sort of expand that lane. So these comments, I think, are really helpful to us. The last point that I'll just acknowledge, that this is the one and only report that this body can and must convey directly to the president. So I urge you to take this opportunity as seriously as responsible. The executive order literally mandates, I think in this case it's February 16th, because I think February 15th might be a holiday, but on February 16th this report will be delivered to the president. So it's a unique opportunity, and I encourage you all to take the greatest advantage of it as you can.
Thanks, Reed. Any other questions, comments for Jamie? All right, thank you, Jamie. So we will proceed into the next agenda item, which is new business. I will ask if there is any new business at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. I would like to present a motion.
Okay.
I move that the council expedite the drafting of revisions to Section 106 implementing regulations and direct the executive director and staff to develop a schedule with milestones and deliverables within 30 days. Concurrently, I ask that council members be given 60 days from today to provide substantive feedback and propose changes to current regulations. I move that the ACHP staff provide biweekly updates to that effect and on that effort.
Thank you. So, point of clarification, so this is a motion to amend your original motion.
Correct.
So we need a second to amend the original motion.
I second.
Okay. I think one point, I'm sorry, biweekly or bi-monthly? There was some, I don't know if we heard.
Twice a month.
Twice a month.
Okay. Did I say?
You said bi-weekly.
Excuse me.
Bi-weekly. That's
Do I
what
have
I
to read it
seconded.
again?
No. Okay, so now we can have discussion. Discussion on the amendment as proposed to the original motion.
So just, this is a amendment to strike in full the original amendment and replace with this.
The original motion, yes.
Correct.
All right, so we have a motion and a second, open for discussion. Any questions, comments?
So the motion would direct the staff and the executive director, it does not mention a working group? Does that preclude the existence of a working group? Is one question. I would also think it might be helpful, we've had sort of a piecemeal discussion of the sort of regs change process in its entirety, and I think it might be helpful to have, if it's possible to have it just briefly today, more of an overview of that and what are the opportunities for public comment within that. From my point of view, we need to check with our members. We need to get their input into this, and not sure that 60 days to provide substantive feedback is really going to be enough for that, but maybe that's also misunderstood and is not our only opportunity to do so. I would also echo some of the comments that John Fowler has made about finding the data, finding the examples, and finding the patterns. So what really are the problems here with Section 106? Why are agencies not able to move projects forward or conclude consultation? Why, for example, so skittish about adverse effects? Is it because they take a long time to resolve? You know, not every problem with every project can be laid at the feet of historic preservation or consulting parties, and we will continue to push back. We have data about our roles and our 30-day review periods, and I think there are really some baseline areas where federal agencies can be reminded of their responsibilities, can be refreshed, get more training. Early consultation is definitely one of those points. Not presenting SHPOs and TIPOs with the fait accompli, whether that has to do with identification of historic properties, identifying the APE, or any other phase in that process. So I also think it's important that we remember that regs changes are not the only tool at our disposal. The ACHP provides training for federal agencies. We need to lean in on that. We also need to make sure that project proponents who are not employees of your agencies are really more attuned to and more informed about the Section 106 process and how that should roll out. Whether those are grantees, licensees, permit holders, I think that's really where we're seeing a disconnect in the Section 106 process from the SHPO point of view. Training and better communication with those parties will be significant. So I sort of, while as you all have heard me say before, SHPOs are used to having a timeline, and we have a 30-day timeline within the regs. We like a good timeline. I'm just not sure if 60 days to provide that feedback is really enough, and would like to have some further clarification of that as part of the entirety of the process.
Any other questions, comments?
So I would also like to propose to amend the proposed action to require that before the council engages in substantive discussions and establish a review process or timeline, that the council ensure broad and meaningful coordination with Indian tribes, including Alaska Native communities, tribal historic preservation officers, and Native Hawaiian organizations to inform any subsequent council actions, and that input received through these coordination efforts be provided to the council at the September meeting.
Okay, so.
I know, it might be out of order.
No,
Okay.
no, that's fine. Okay, so we have on the floor now an amendment to that proposed amendment.
Yes.
Do we have a second to NAFPO's amendment? Yeah, that'd be great.
So it is that before the council engages in substantive discussions or establishes a review process or timeline for developing initial recommendations on the regulations review, the council ensure broad and meaningful coordination with Indian tribes, including Alaska Native communities, tribal historic preservation officers, and Native Hawaiian organizations to inform any subsequent council actions, and that input received through these coordination efforts be provided to the council at the September meeting.
Do we have a second? Okay, any discussion on the amendment as proposed and seconded? As
Mr.
offered
Vice
by
Chair.
NAFPO.
Michael?
I think that amendment basically negates the whole purpose of the amendment to the original motion. And that purpose is to establish a reasonable timeline to get to a point where we can have discussion and further consultation and tribal consultation and everything else that goes before making a decision. It puts all of that off with, it essentially makes no timeline. So I would respectfully ask that we not vote in favor of that amendment.
Any other comments on the motion at hand?
I guess I have just a tidbit that we talked about during our a sidebar outside that I think is good for everyone on the council's awareness. The Bureau of Indian Affairs has actually already started a process to engage tribal partners in ideas and ways to revise Section 106 to make it better from a tribal perspective. And I think that the council would definitely benefit from that effort that is already underway. And I don't know the exact timeline of that, but it just so that we're all aware, there is an effort that's already underway on the tribal side on this.
Thank you. Other
May I follow up on that comment? Is that offer?
Margaret, into the microphone, thank you.
Little red lights on, there we go.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Thanks. In your thinking about the that process that's going on and the appropriateness of engaging that from the Department of the Interior, where in the process, and maybe we don't have a timeline, to better understand where to bring that information in, is that something that would be potentially, maybe this is a question for the chair, handed to a working group?
Yeah, so I was going to wait till everyone else commented, but making a comment to that too. I think the point that Jamie made and the discussions that we've had since February, between members and with the external groups is a lot of what I believe they're trying to capture is already ongoing. Any process that we would move forward with as a council just under the pure regulatory process would capture a lot of that. I would say from a typical agency operation going through the regulatory process versus the council going for the regulatory process, there is expanded amount of opportunity and expanded amount of expectation for engagement. So it's my view that how I read the intent behind the motion that's on the table is that input and consideration would be captured as we move forward, and it would be something that we would ensure that we provide to members, not just before the September meeting, but all the way through the regulatory process. So my view is that the underlying motion is very process oriented to frame us moving forward and help people understand what that looks like. And I think that will help and facilitate a lot of additional conversations and identification of opportunity areas to better engage with our federal agency partners. So this is also a tool for our other agency partners to take back with them to better utilize as they engage. So as far as the motion at hand, I do not plan to support it, mainly because I think that we have processes and steps already underway, whether as a council or agencies or externals, that is already accomplishing that. And we will be sure to work with staff to incorporate any feedback that we're getting as a council, any feedback that members are providing, any feedback that we're getting from our federal agency partners or others to staff, to the council members as we proceed. So that was what I was going to say there at the end before moving forward with a vote on the motion at hand, but I will continue to open it up for further discussion. Yep.
Yes, and I want to reiterate why I use the term coordination rather than consultation. Coordination looks different than what consultation is typically seen to be. And with that, particularly because the regulations will impact how 106 occurs on tribal lands, there is further engagement that has to occur with our tribal governments specifically in understanding how that is reflected and engages with our own tribal codes and ordinances. Additionally, I would like to invite Ira Matt to the table. He's been integral in building the relationship with the BIA and can kind of speak to what that work currently consists of.
I'm just going to get comfortable here. Oh, is there another one? I was pretty happy right here. All right, nothing like being on the record. It's Jamie Leushinger. So yeah, just a little bit of background here. This actually started late last fall. National Association of Tribal Historic Preservation Officers started talking with the Bureau of Indian Affairs on ways that we can improve the Section 106 process on tribal lands. A lot of times tribes are subject to additional regulatory review because of trust land status, the relationship with the BIA, and it's not comparable to a lot of non-tribal individuals. Something we've addressed a lot at the Advisory Council in the past, with the recognition that the regulations, the statute in and of itself, did not take into account a lot of the unique scenarios and situations that Indian tribes were going to be involved in. Statute itself was developed at the height of termination era, was never an intention to address Indian tribes. So we were working with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, utilizing existing tools under the Section 106 framework to identify how we could improve and make a more efficient process on tribal lands. And I think as a lot of you are expressing here, tribes were saying there is too much time taken to be able to advance processes. Economic development is being slowed. It's not that tribes do not want to protect our resources, but they need to be able to tailor that process. And unfortunately, federal agencies haven't necessarily taken the time to look at how exactly we can improve the process for Indian tribes. A lot of it's looking specifically at their agency actions, which is perfectly fine. So NAFBO, working with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, initiated this, and initially, we also thought that from this, it was going to generate a lot of information for potential regulatory revisions. We've held some nationwide forums with tribes on this process. They have begun to provide input on changes that they would like to see. And so part of what this motion coming from Lakota was noting, tribes are actively pursuing this conversation right now. And there's nobody better to help agencies be able to take into account how to possibly reform the Section 106 process than to hear from the tribes themselves, who both have a jurisdictional role on their tribal lands, a sovereignty component of the National Historic Preservation Act, but they're trying to improve it for their own people in a way that balances both, right, the needs and intent of the National Historic Preservation Act and the needs of the people. So we do have some feedback, we do have information, but tribes are already going down this path, and what we were hoping to do is just find a way, because of the Advisory Council's responsibility here, to have them start to do the outreach in a more formal way to start to generate some of that input specifically for this. But as Lakota noted, also to make sure that when we get to the point in time there's a Federal Register notice, this isn't a point where tribes are scrambling to work with their legal offices and staff to create a response. It'll be at a point in time where they're looking to see, was their input incorporated, and it'll be a more productive, efficient process when we get there. So there's been a lot of changes to the amendments, and so things might not be lining up properly, but that's where we were with what Lakota was bringing forward, to try to have that in some ways almost run parallel to what you guys are talking about with the timeline, or possibly happen before, because it could in a lot of ways be very instructive of what the timeline might be.
Thank you. That's really good information, and I appreciate what you're doing with the tribes to work on this same problem that we're all considering. And I certainly agree that you have a unique perspective that we should consider carefully. I'm not sure how it relates to the underlying motion, which is about setting a timeline, getting a timeline started for dealing with this, and doesn't really contemplate a specific date for even saying when we might get to a Federal Register notice, let alone actually have that Federal Register notice occur. So I love the idea of collaboration and consultation, both, and I think we should have that, but I'd like to get started.
Absolutely respect the opinion, and I think when you're working around timelines, knowing how all the parties want to be able to participate, their decision-making structures, and some of the challenges and opportunities out there are definitely instructive of timelines, at least in my opinion, for how this works. As we know, tribal governments, councils have meeting structures. There's opportunities from intertribal organizations, and I'm not saying it's meant to delay. As I noted, it could easily run parallel to this. It's just another layer that needs to be accounted for from federal agencies, and it's an opportunity that we wanted to make sure everybody was aware of, and primarily that by the next meeting, that maybe we do have a coordinated effort to inform that, and I'm not saying that the timeline can't move forward and other elements can't be brought, but we would like to see, possibly led through TIP committee, an effort to coordinate to generate some of that information. So that's simply what it is. Appreciate your input, Mr. Bourne.
Thank you, and I would like to see that as well, and don't think we need to pass that second amendment to achieve that. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you, Ira. Thank you, Michael.
I'm wondering if, given all of the comments, including the vice chair's comments, it might be helpful, also in the interest of time, because I know it's already 11:30, should we take the motion in pieces and see if pieces of it would pass in a logical order?
Sure. So the next procedural step would be to have a roll call vote on NAFPO's motion. Once that is done, pending the outcome of that vote, if the motion passes, that amendment language, in my mind, would be tacked onto the revised language as presented by Interior. And then we would vote on that amendment as presented by Interior initially to start the new business. And then I apologize for the redundancy, but then we have to have a full vote on the amendment, the amended motion as originally presented earlier in the meeting. So yes, we're right now looking at 3 votes. It can move pretty quickly, but, and again, apologize, that's Robert's rules, but.
Okay.
But I think
Yeah.
So Mike, if I may, Vice Chairman, my concern is that the language of this must happen before this happens makes your motion, our action over the next 60 days contingent upon satisfactory results from what you said. And I think if we want to do it concurrently, that, you know, I'm asking for 30 days, 60 days, regular updates. I don't think there's any mutual exclusivity to involving tribal involvement, but it seems to me the language as I heard it first said, well, we're not doing anything until we get all this impact. And I think that was Mike's point. We got to get going, right? And so let's vote on my motion, and then if you want to have another motion on tribal involvement, let's talk about that. But I think having them intertwined, I think, defeats the purpose of my motion. So I just screwed up the whole Robert's Rule of Order again.
Love the simplicity. We still have to vote on NAFPO's motion, then we'll vote on the amended motion, and then the original motion as amended. If NAFPO at that point wants to submit a new motion, separate, you are more than welcome.
So procedurally, if we voted, no offense, if we voted no on your amendment, that doesn't mean you can't then come up with a different motion, right? Is everybody clear on that? Yeah. So we're not saying it's not a good idea, but maybe we now sort of linked it and let's unlink it.
Or would it be possible to withdraw the motion? Yes. And then we only have 2, and then we can consider it?
It is possible. What we would need is a majority okay. We could do that by a voice vote if NAFPO would like to propose withdrawing the motion since it has been presented to the group.
So I'll propose to withdraw the motion as it was currently stated.
Second. All those in favor, or any discussion on that motion to withdraw? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Motion carries. So now we are back to Interior's base
Amended
amended
motion. If you could
motion.
repeat it one more time. Yes, and we do not need another second. We just need a reminder.
Okay. I move that the council expedite the drafting of revisions to the Section 106 implementing regulations and direct the executive director and staff to develop a schedule with milestones and deliverables within 30 days. Concurrently, I ask that council members be given 60 days from today to provide substantive feedback and propose changes to current regulations. I move that the ACHP further staff provide bi-monthly updates on the effort.
Bi-weekly or bi-monthly? That's bi-weekly. But not the second time.
Do I have to reread it again?
We're good.
That can be, we'll just make sure we capture that in the, and I'll ask, could maybe Joy, could you email me the language specifically, and I'll make sure that we capture the intent is bi-monthly, not
No,
bi-weekly.
it's every other week.
Bi-weekly.
Bi-weekly. He
Right.
said bi-monthly every 2 weeks. So he meant bi-weekly.
I did mean bi-weekly. If you prefer, I will read the whole thing one more time to get it right.
With the correct
With the correct
Bye.
language.
Thank you.
I'm not sure what I would do without Mike Bourne around to correct my grammar. Yeah, thank you.
How about every 2 weeks? Can we agree
Can
on
I
that
just say
language?
that? Fine. All right. That's what happens when lawyers draft comments. I move that the council expedite the drafting of revisions to Section 106 implementing regulations and direct the executive director and staff to develop a schedule with milestones and deliverables within 30 days. Concurrently, I ask that council members be given 60 days from today to provide substantive feedback and propose changes to current regulations. I move that the ACHP staff provide every 2 weeks updates on the effort.
So this will be a roll call.
Yep. So any further discussion? Seeing none, we will move for a roll call vote.
All right.
Was there, did that get seconded?
I'll second it if it wasn't seconded.
That we already had.
It
a
was already
second.
second. Thank you.
Yeah. On the original intent, whether it was bi-monthly, bi-weekly, who cares? Roll call vote.
Okay. Vice Chairman Travis Voyles.
Aye.
Councilmember Michael Bose. Councilmember Margaret Everson. Councilmember Jamie Gardner. Councilmember Rick Gonzalez. Councilmember Marek String. Councilmember Kyle Scherer. Councilmember John Tsuda. Amy Adamas, designee for Governor Landry. Joe Imamura for the Architect of the Capitol.
Aye.
Katie Devlin for the Council on Environmental Quality. We can't do that.
We don't have a formal proxy in that regard.
Okay.
Yeah, so that'll be.
No vote. Okay. Michael Bourne for the Department of Agriculture.
Aye.
Trey Watkins for the Department of Homeland Security.
Aye.
Brian Horn for the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Kevin Lilly for the Department of the Interior.
Aye.
Lauren Smith for the Department of Transportation. Did he leave the table too? Okay. Okay. So the Department of Housing and Urban Development as a proxy for the Department of Veterans Affairs. Kristen Thomasgard for the Department of War. Christy Tunstall Williams for the General Services Administration. Lakota Hubai for the National Association of Tribal Historic Preservation Officers.
Abstain.
Ann Rains for the National Conference of Historic Preservation Officers.
No.
Betsy Merrick for the National Trust for Historic Preservation.
I abstain.
The yes votes carry the motion.
now we have on the table an amended.
So the exact same motion as amended, we're going to do another roll call, just quickly move through it because it's working on the original. It's already been seconded, so.
All right, one more time. Vice Chairman Travis Voyles. Councilmember Michael Bose. Councilmember Margaret Everson. Councilmember Jamie Gardner. Councilmember Rick Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilmember Mark Strang.
Aye.
Councilmember Kyle Shear. Councilmember John Tasuda. Amy Adamas, designee for Governor Landry. Joe Mamura for the Architect of the Capitol.
Aye.
Trey Watkins for the Department of Homeland Security. Brian Horn for the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Kevin Lilly for the Department of Interior. Lauren, oh, he's not here yet. Department of Housing and Urban Development as proxy for the Department of Veterans Affairs. Michael Bourne for the Department of Agriculture. Kristen Thomasgard for the Department of War. Christy Tunstall-Williams for the General Services Administration. Lakota Hubai for the National Association of Tribal Historic Preservation Officers.
Abstain, and I just want to note that we need board approval before we can take an official opinion.
Ann Rains for the Conference of State Historic Preservation Officers.
Abstain.
And Betsy Merritt for the National Trust for Historic Preservation.
Abstain.
The yes votes carry the motion.
Any other, we're in the section of the agenda, new business, any other new business? Nope. Good, you heard me practicing. We are in the final agenda item of new business. Any additional new business?
Okay, so I believe I have now amended the language. So I make a motion that the council engages concurrently in substantive discussions and establishes a review process, or wait, hold on, sorry. I make a motion that the council engages concurrently to ensure broad and meaningful coordination with Indian tribes, including Alaska Native communities, tribal historic preservation officers, and Native Hawaiian organizations to inform any subsequent council actions, and that input received through these coordination efforts be provided to the council before the September meeting.
Thank you. Motion on the table, is there a second? We have a second. The motion is open for discussion. Kyle?
The language, any subsequent council actions, I wonder whether that's potentially too broad. If really the intent of the amendment is to either focus on process or the substantive revisions to section 106.
So let's see. Can I read? Okay.
So let's repeat the motion
Okay.
on the table.
Okay, I will make a motion that the council engages concurrently in substantive discussions and ensure broad and meaningful coordination with Indian tribes, including Alaska Native communities, tribal historic preservation officers, and Native Hawaiian organizations to inform the regulatory review process, and that input received through these coordination efforts be provided to the council before the September meeting.
Thank you. Any discussion? Michael?
I think regulatory review process is also overbroad.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I think regulatory review process is also overbroad. We're talking about this particular review, I think.
Would you maybe expand on what your intent is behind that particular language?
I guess I was just trying to capture what was focused on in the last motion.
Yeah.
Is there a title we want to give that process?
I can give my input on that, or Kyle, if you want to.
Could we just reference by title the prior motion that just passed?
Yes. And this is all clarifying. This is not amendments. We're just clarifying the language here.
So maybe we could,
So it's to inform the process as set forth in the previous motion. Okay, and Jamie, are you still second? All right.
and you have your mic on. Oh,
Well, I didn't, but I'm a little, what exactly, are we going to take a vote on this? And what exactly are we voting on, if we could repeat the motion?
This is a new motion. Could you repeat the motion again, NAFPO, so we're clear?
Yes, so, repeat the motion?
Yes.
So, I make a motion that the council engages concurrently in substantive discussions and ensure broad and meaningful coordination with Indian tribes, including Alaska Native communities, tribal historic preservation officers, and Native Hawaiian organizations to inform any council actions related to the previous motion. Is that
To inform the process set forth in the previous motion.
to inform the process set forth in the previous motion, and that input received through these coordination efforts be provided to the council before the September meeting.
so sorry, one clarifying question. Is the intent of this to, and the broad coordination, intent to inform the particular individual actions that were included in Interior's previous motion? So in a hypothetical, your intent behind this would be extensive coordination to develop the timeline and deliverables that are expected as the outcome of that motion.
So I think there needs to be coordination on that aspect, particularly in like understanding, as Ira mentioned, those timelines being informed by, particularly for any changes that may be focused on tribal lands. We need to be aware of kind of the turnaround periods, an average turnaround period for the tribal nations, for those tribal governments, those officials to weigh in on those matters. So I think that is where there is that intent. And then additionally, it is also to inform what the content of the review, Section 106 review process as well.
Any questions, comments?
I just think that this is.
Here, Mike.
In the process.
Michael.
Oh, sorry.
I'm not calling you Mike. I'm just saying.
That's all right, thank you. I just worry that this is coming too prematurely in the process of trying to load on more requirements to even kick this process off. At this point, we're looking at a 60-day period for the staff to come up basically with a timeline. And I think after the staff comes up with that timeline and process and the committees meet, and in the process of the committees meeting, all this consultation will occur. And to front load that requirement here, I'm just concerned that we're loading things down with bureaucratic processes that are going to slow the whole process rather than expedite the process.
Mr. Vice Chair, I'm sorry. I think that this particular motion is ambiguous enough and can be interpreted in enough different ways that it's going to cause troubles that are unintended. And I don't see what it's accomplishing. Going along with the prior comment, I don't think there's anything that the motion from Department of Interior has proposed and that we passed that reduces or limits consultation and collaboration with tribes or anyone else. So I don't see what it's accomplishing, and I think it has the potential to have some unintended consequences because of the language, the way it was actually drafted. I can't support that.
John?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I think, I'm willing to support it. I think through the Tribal and Indigenous Committee, I think we can kind of help guide that along. I do think, in fairness, the NAPO and the tribal groups are a large group who have a lot of different ideas. So it will actually help the process, I think. Just in developing, I know this is a process-oriented motion, right, that you made, that we passed. I think it will help that, even just to get a sense of the timelines. They do need time. These are, some large, some small communities, the level of resources they have to react to these things. They are very interested in, but, it takes them some time. I think we can help focus the schedule, I'll call it that, from their perspective, in the overall effort to have a good timeline in getting reg reform done. So I'm happy to kind of try to help push that through along. So,
any other comments, questions? Ann?
I remain overall concerned that the 60 days is arbitrary and it seems to indicate that is the only opportunity for substantive feedback. So to me, the 60 days is objectionable or not necessary. I don't mind the 30-day initial period to develop a schedule, but then that schedule that is developed by the staff should decide what are the feedback periods, how long are they, when do they occur?
I have a, Vice Chairman. John Lakota, I completely get what you're coming from, right? And I think open and transparent is what we're trying to accomplish. But respectfully, I can't support it because I think we've worked this so that it is as inclusive as it can be, and I'm just concerned that if we add another layer, it's going to slow the process down. So I understand and agree with your intent. I'm just not sure I agree with the language. So that's just my thought.
Thanks, Kevin. Any other questions, comments? So there is a motion on the table. We have a second. No further questions or comments. We'll do a roll call vote.
Right.
Yeah, could we read the motion out one more time? Sorry.
I make a motion that the council engages concurrently in substantive discussions and ensures broad and meaningful coordination with Indian tribes, including Alaska Native communities, tribal historic preservation officers, and Native Hawaiian organizations to,
Inform the process as set forth in the previous motion.
Yes.
And
that input received through these coordination efforts be provided to the council before the September meeting.
All right, we can proceed.
Vice Chairman Voyles.
No.
Councilmember Michael Bose. No. Councilmember Margaret Everson.
No.
Councilmember Jamie Gardner. Councilmember Rick Gonzalez.
No.
Councilmember Marek String. Councilmember Kyle Shearer. Aye. Councilmember John Tsuda. Aye. Emmy Adamas, designee for Governor Jeff Landry.
Nay.
Joe Imamura for the Architect of the Capitol.
Aye.
Let's see. Michael Bourne for the Department of Agriculture. Trey Watkins for the Department of Homeland Security.
Nay.
Brian Horn for the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Kevin Lilly for the Department of the Interior.
No.
Department of Housing and Urban Development as proxy for the Department of Veterans Affairs. Okay. Kristen Thomasgard for the Department of War. Christy Tunstall-Williams for the General Services Administration. Lakota Hobai for the National Association of Tribal Historic Preservation Officers.
Aye.
Ann Rains for the National Conference of State Historic Preservation Officers. And Betsy Merritt for the National Trust for Historic Preservation.
Yes.
The noes carry the motion, so it is denied. It fails.
I just want to make one comment. I tend to agree with the comments that Kevin made at the end. I understand your intent. I'm not sure about the process. That's why I voted the way I did. I commit to working with you, working with staff, working with John on how we can ensure that as we move forward, we are meeting the intent of the process, but we are continuing to provide that coordination, and when we get to the stage, consultation appropriately. So I don't want it to leave here, and I feel like I'm not going to impede my interpretation on others voting, but I feel like that was where a lot of us landed. So I do make that commitment to you, and I will talk with staff on how we go about in accomplishing that. So, Reed, anything?
Just make an observation, going back to the main motion that passed and the acknowledgement that within 60 days, members would be providing the staff with that feedback. I just want to sort of echo something that was said earlier. Two things. One is I would encourage that feedback to be as specific as possible about specific types of problems and specific solutions. And I say that because we get a lot of very general statements that we're then sort of left to try to interpret, do they mean this or that or what have you. So I would encourage that advice and input to be as specific as possible. I would also just note that the current regulations have very specific timelines for the ACHP, for states, and for tribes. They have none for federal agencies. So to the extent that you would urge us to consider timelines for federal agency actions, we're all ears. Thank you.
Thanks, Reed. We're still in the, yeah.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? It didn't kind of fit with the motion. The subgroup, how is that different from the committee, the Regulatory and Governance Committee? And I asked because GSA was not at the last meeting and we were not included in the subgroup and would like to be if it is a separate entity.
Yeah, I will definitely note your interest. The subgroup was intended to hopefully operate a little bit more nimble than the full committee, and it's at the chair's discretion too. So open to your thoughts on that. That was kind of what I expressed at the last committee. If folks have ideas and visions on how that subgroup can be useful, more than willing to take that into consideration.
That's great. We'd just like to be included.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're still in the new business section. Any other new business before we move to adjourn? Okay. I would move that we adjourn. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved. Do we have a second?
Do you want to remind them when the next meeting is? September 29th?
Yep, I didn't read my last point. Let me, the next business meeting is scheduled for September 29th and 30th. Thank you all for today, and thank you for reminding me to read my last note. Hopefully everyone has a good afternoon, because it is 12 o'clock.